Okay, amigos, we are back for another gear video. I mentioned before when I did my EDC pouch, the Boulder wallet from Art Company, that there were a couple items in here I wanted to do a deeper dive on. This is one of them. Usually lives right here. This is the Victorinox Swiss Army knife manager. And you're going to have to forgive me. I'm going to try to keep things in focus as best I can, but the iPhone does have a little problem with dealing with something this small. This is a little bit thicker than the standard Cadet, which is the basic Swiss Army knife that everybody knows, the smallest Swiss Army knife that everybody knows. The little tiny pocket one that has 3 tools on it. I prefer this one. So what I want to do today is explain how it's similar to the Cadet, and then why I think the little tiny additions make it a better EDC solution than the Cadet. And because it's a small knife with very few features that need much explanation, it's probably going to be a short video. So let's jump into it. As you can see, standard classic red Swiss Army knife look with the Victorinox logo. You've got your keychain connector right there with the key ring. I added this, I made this paracord pull so I could pull it out of the pocket on the Boulder wallet easier. You could easily attach it to a keychain if you want. Although I think this is maybe a little thick. Unless you're one of those people that likes like the big, massive keys in your pocket, this is probably a little thick. The Cadet works better in that way. This is more of a fifth pocket carry. You know, the little coin purse for men. This can fit in there really well. I put it in the Boulder wallet, as I said. How it's similar to the Cadet. So the Cadet has this, which a lot of Swiss Army knives have, which the camera's going to have trouble focusing on. I'm just warning you. It's the classic tweezers. You know these if you know Swiss Army knives. These are great tweezers. They're such a simple design. I think this says a lot about Victorinox, actually. This is such a simple design. It's just flat pieces of metal that are bent the right way. And they're so effective as tweezers. It's just pure, it's minimalism at its purest. These are great. I love them. I use them a lot because I get splinters a lot, which is weird because I don't think I touch wood that often. What these don't have, that the Cadet and a lot of Swiss Army knives have, is there is no toothpick. There's a reason for that, because there's something else in this side, which we'll get to later. So there's no toothpicks. That's maybe the one bummer, although in all honesty, the toothpick on the Swiss Army knife is something I like the idea of, but I never want to put it in my mouth, so I don't use it that often. I carry the wooden toothpicks in here instead, which I actually don't use as often as I thought I would either. Hopefully that doesn't mean I have things in my teeth all the time. What this also has that you'll recognize from the Cadet and from a lot of Swiss Army knives is the basic Swiss Army blade. What I like about this blade and having this, I carry a larger, am I in focus here? There we go. I carry a larger pocket knife on me all the time, so you might be wondering, like, why is this nice to have? 2 reasons. Number one, this size, being this small, means you can do a lot more precision work with this little thing than you can with your big pocket knife. It's also great for zip ties. You know, you just slip it in the inside of the zip tie and it'll cut it off. You don't even have to pull out the scissors, which we'll get to in a second. The other reason I really like this is my standard pocket knife, which I'll eventually do a video on. I like to keep it sharp, but I don't like to keep it razor sharp, because I find something that I use that often and pull out that often, if it's too sharp, I'm upping the risk of cutting myself, and cutting myself really well. So I keep it sharp, but not sharp enough that if something just glances across my skin, it's not going to cut me. Whereas on the other hand, this Swiss Army knife, I haven't done it to this particular one yet, but this Swiss Army knife, this small blade, I like to get this razor sharp so that when I need something super sharp, I can pull this out, and because it's smaller, I'll have more control. You know, it's not something I'm going to whittle wood with or something like that, but if I need to cut paper, you know, you need to cut something out on paper, that's going to work. Something you would use a small razor blade for, but maybe not something as robust as a utility knife. So the blade, great, very useful. What the Cadet also has is the file. This is not a metal file, it's not a wood file, it's a nail file, which I just used a few minutes ago. Because when you film with your hands, you realize even if you just trimmed your nails 2 days ago, you need to trim again before you film. And this is great for getting that edge off. It also has, let's get up there, come on, focus. There we go, a flat edge for screwdriver. You might think that's not very useful. I use this more times than you would think. It's also really great in certain situations for a small pry bar. Staples, you know, if you, like for example, you buy something you want to hang on the wall, they have these things where they staple cardboard corners on them now, and those things are impossible to get off. This will get under there. Camera doesn't like that angle, huh? So you'd find that on the Cadet as well. And of course, probably I would say arguably the best feature of a Swiss Army knife, in my opinion, that you would find on the Cadet and this one as well, are the scissors. I love these scissors. These scissors are fantastic. I use them all the time. You know, I talked about cutting paper. These will cut paper. I also think that the design lends itself well to a little sharpening every once in a while, which is nice because you're actually buying something that you're going to use longer than one use. You know, I don't mean one use of cutting, but one use as in when they get dull, they're no longer useful. These can be sharpened, they can be used, they can be continually used. A Swiss Army knife, even something cheap and small like this one, is an investment. Not monetarily, but it's an investment in time. You're buying this believing it's going to last. And Swiss Army knives, the Cadet that I had before this one, I had a black Cadet. When I bought this, I gave it to somebody who needed scissors and small blade, you know, like in their bag. And that Swiss Army knife, that particular one, was over 25 years old. And this plastic on the outside, yeah, it had scratches if you looked up close, but if I held it like this, it looked brand new. And everything on it was working like the day I bought it. So back to the scissors. Scissors on Swiss Army knives, especially small ones like this, incredibly useful. Also useful for zip ties, which makes it sound like I kidnap people all the time. Zip ties are really useful too. If you don't know that, you should carry a couple with you. You find yourself in situations more than not where you can use a zip tie. But what makes this different, other than the toothpick missing? What makes this different, and what makes this, in my opinion, a better everyday carry than the Cadet? Well, there's only two features that are different other than the missing toothpick. And the first one is this. It's right on the same side with the blade. This is a 3-piece tool. 2 parts of it I don't find that useful personally, but one extremely useful. So let's start with this one here. This is the bottle opener. I'm not sure why so many tools come with bottle openers. I don't open a lot of bottles. I don't know a lot of people that open a lot of bottles enough to worry about whether they have a bottle opener on them all the time. And most, if you're thinking beer, well, most domestic beer comes with twist caps. So still not sure. I think it's just because it's easy to make and add to a tool like this. They could have easily left that out, but why not add it? And by that logic, sure, why not? What you also have is this little inlet right here. This is a wire stripper, something I don't use very often either. But what I love about this wire stripper, going back to the design and the thought put behind Victorinox tools, I told you it's on the same side as the blade. What that means is if you have a wire you want to strip, you can converge the blade and the wire stripper into that wire, and then turn around the wire and cut it, and then this will allow you to pull. I don't have a wire to test it for. Sorry, I didn't prepare that much. But useful if you do a lot of, well, I shouldn't say if you do a lot, but if you do a fair share of wire stripping. Obviously, if you do a lot, you'd want to get a dedicated tool. But nice to have in that 1 out of 1,000 times where you're just in a situation where I need to strip this wire, and in this case, a very small wire, and cool, I happen to have this in my pocket. But the main reason that this particular 3-in-1 tool is useful is the third use. Come on, let's focus. Focus, focus. There we go. Can you see that tip? I'm not going to turn it that way. I know it won't do it. That is a Phillips head screwdriver tip, which looks unsubstantial. It looks tiny. It looks like it wouldn't be useful at all. That's the deceptive thing about this. This screwdriver tip is extremely versatile. It will work on really small screws. I think it'll even almost work on screws as small as on eyeglasses, because the tip is particularly sharp, so it can get into smaller. I don't think it'll do eyeglasses, but almost that small. But it will also, because of the open sides, go into larger screw heads as well. It'll go to a normal size screw. Obviously, at a certain point, it's going to just spin in there. But because of that, it's incredibly useful. There's situations where you just need a screwdriver. You don't need to unscrew 15 screws. You just need to loosen one thing or take one thing out. You got something that needs the batteries replaced in it. Boom, you got this in your pocket. So because of that, I find that one thing the advantage it puts over the Cadet. And it makes up for that little bit of thickness, which I don't mind at all. I actually like holding this one better than the other one. I like knowing that something's in my hand. But there's also a fourth use for this that isn't obvious. And it has to do with the last tool, which is the reason we don't have a toothpick here, which is the manager. See that little slide right there, right here? Slide that out, and you've got a pen. This isn't a pen you're going to want to use all the time, but in the emergency circumstance where you need a pen, there it is. And it's kind of like a space pen refill. It's a pressurized ink. So I'm not sure if it's water resistant. I don't think it's grease based, but I do know that it will write sideways and upside down. And I guess if you could find a refill that had the water resistant ink, you could put that in there, because it slides out and you just put the refill right back in. It just pushes in. But going back to what I said, the fourth use for this, when you hold this in your hand, look at that. It gives you just a little bit of pressure against your knuckle to hold that pen in a little bit better. Otherwise, you're doing it like this, which is fine, but you don't have as much control, because see how that end's moving around a lot? So when you bust that out, look at that. Stabilizer, better handwriting, especially for those of us who have naturally a little messier handwriting, aka men. So this is the Victorinox Manager. This is my favorite small EDC Swiss Army knife.